Before I get into today's episode, let me tell you about Obscure History's bonus content. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, which studies suggest you probably are, you should see a subscribe button at the homepage of this show. If you hit that button, you will get access to a special subscriber-only edition of each episode that I produce. The exclusive content includes personal anecdotes, elaborations on themes from the episode, sources that I've used, and a whole bunch more very interesting information. My goal is to hit 100 subscribers within 6 months, and I believe we can do that because you're the best. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the episode. Last week I told you about an obscure sect of Christian nudists who believed in the power of free love and that they were immune from all sin. Pretty much the opposite of what you probably think of when we talk about the church. In fact, when I say church, what do you imagine? Most of you probably thought of a colossal megachurch with a flashy production crew and 15 social media managers. The megachurch is as American as apple pie at this point. But what if I told you that America's first celebrity pastor was a very curious woman from our frigid northern neighbor, and that she was kidnapped at the height of her career? My name is Josh, and this is Obscure History. It's summer. A sea of faces stand so close together that they are nearly touching, staring in a singular direction. The energy in the large auditorium is electric and palpable. Each person in the mass has come to this grand hall with the expectation of miracles. For some, it's their last resort. For them, this service is a knot at the end of a long rope they've been sliding down for a while. For others, this service was the first item on the checklist. Rumors of a miracle worker setting up shop in downtown LA had circulated first around Los Angeles, then California, then the whole United States. And those rumors weren't just the mutterings of old folk at the church picnic. The national news had all but confirmed everyone's most wild and hopeful stories. For these visitors, Angelus Temple was the clear and obvious starting point after a tough diagnosis, divorce, or bad day. Though their paths leading to the temple were diverse, their goal was singular. They anxiously waited for the star of the show, a young woman, a Canadian minister who had a reputation for turning broken bones straight and expelling demons, the one who could solve their problems and give their life direction. After a long wait, she appeared, angelic, immaculate. Her robes were pristine, and she gave a deep smile and polite wave to everyone in attendance. The crowd went wild. They could no longer contain the excitement they felt and erupted with cheers and applause. The woman expertly controlled the crowd with her body language and ushered them to a reverent silence before she spoke. She introduced herself as Sister Amiee Semple McPherson, and then spent the afternoon preaching the gospel and healing the sick.
Still by the power of faith, faith is nothing bigger than we are. It's bigger than fire. It's bigger than oceans. It's bigger than the Mediterranean, the Red Sea rather. It's bigger than the River Jordan. It's bigger than armaments. It's bigger than death. Hallelujah. Sister, I wonder if I have faith. Yes. Glory to God. Even faith is a grain of mustard. So say, this mountain be thou removed, and it shall be removed into the sea, and there be no more. Paul knew this power of faith. And so, when after preaching the glorious gospel, and effecting by prayer the healing of a man to whom I referred a few moments ago, to whom he said, stand upright upon thy feet. The man leaping stood, having never walked before or having any use of his limbs. Paul was a friend of fire.
Amiee Semple McPherson was born Amiee Elizabeth Kennedy in 1890 in Salford, Ontario, Canada. Her parents were humble people of faith. Her mother Mildred was a volunteer at the Salvation Army and often brought Amiee along to help as well. In fact, the Salvation Army was such a formative part of their life that little Amiee would play soup kitchen with her dolls rather than tea party. Her father was a devout Methodist, and Amiee soaked all of it in. Despite doing her very best to honor her parents' faith and to serve those who needed it most, Amiee, like most teens, had a rebellious streak somewhere deep in her heart. Though tame by modern standards, Amiee strongly opposed her parents' teachings by attending movies, reading novels, and participating at community dances, all things which were heavily frowned upon by polite society in the 1900s. During these tumultuous years, Amiee wrote a letter to the Canadian government questioning the validity of teaching Darwinian evolution in the public school system. Her letter gained much popularity, and in this instance she tasted fame for the first time. And not just fame for fame's sake, fame for the Lord's sake. Though she had the proclivity to bend her parents' strict limitations, Amiee never abandoned her faith. In 1907, at the age of 17, she met a man named Robert James Semple at a Pentecostal revival. With its emphasis on personal religious experience and more progressive attitude towards women's role in ministry, Amiee felt right at home. After a short relationship, Robert James Semple and Amiee Elizabeth Kennedy were married. As soon as they were wed, they set off to do an evangelistic tour of China. This tour would prove tragic as the young couple contracted malaria and dysentery while there. Though Amiee would recover, Robert never did. He died in Hong Kong, leaving behind Amiee and an unborn daughter. Grief-stricken, Amiee gave birth to their daughter Roberta on a ship on her way back to the United States. When she arrived home, she once again joined her mother working in the Salvation Army. It was at this time that she met an accountant named Harold McPherson. The two were married in 1912. They were happy, at least on the surface. They had a son named Ralph together, and their life was as complete as could be. But Amiee found herself locked in the cyclical struggle of obsessive-compulsive disorder. She would weep and pray repetitively until it interfered with her life. She also struggled with other health ailments around the time of their marriage, namely appendicitis. According to Amiee, after a botched appendectomy which left her in miserable pain, she heard the voice of God calling her to action. According to the voice, she had neglected her calling by becoming distracted by familial life. As soon as she could stand, she ran after that voice, even leaving behind her husband. One day in 1915, Harold McPherson returned home from work and noticed that his house was unusually quiet. It was quiet because it was empty. Amiee had taken the kids and their belongings with her and only left behind a simple note. In the note, she asked that Harold drop his job and come follow her on her divine quest. She had a new purpose, a task sent from above, like a modern-day Joan of Arc. And she was going to fulfill her mission, whether Harold was involved or not. Shocked by the sudden changes, Harold went after Amiee to bring her and the children home. But upon seeing Amiee at work, he changed his mind and even joined her in evangelism, setting up tents for revival meetings and preaching. The couple sold their house to invest in a traveling pulpit called the Gospel Car. According to Amie's son Rolf, our Gospel Car was a beautiful 1918 8-cylinder Oldsmobile, powerful in its day and spacious. With 3 bench seats, it had plenty of room for nearly everything our family needed as we made our way cross-country to our new home in Los Angeles. The Gospel Car was a church in itself. We strapped folding chairs to the side and carried our own tents for revival meetings. When we stopped into town for services, it did not take long to set up, with the help of supportive church people who were anxious for a visitation of God. The vehicle was also our home. We slept on the back seats, when weather did not permit us to use our tents and cots on the side of the road. The trunk that hung on the back was our kitchen and contained dishes, pots, pans, and everything we needed to prepare and serve meals. Mother thought of everything when she packed the gospel car, and we did not lack for anything as we traveled. What we did not have, we did not miss. Old clothing tied around the tires gave us traction in snow or mud. When the makeshift snow chains did not work, Mother would walk to the nearest farm or town, praying for helpful folks who might drag the car out and send us on our way again. I woke up one morning to find Mother standing at the edge of a small river crossing the road. She had a long stick and was measuring the depth of the water to be sure it was safe for us to cross. We carried portable gas cans on the running boards of the Oldsmobile, and would stop at regular intervals to fill the tank, ensuring we never ran out of gas. Filling stations were not a common sight when we traveled long stretches of road between towns. It sounds like a heavenly life. Just two lovebirds traveling the country together with their children, preaching the good news all along the way. But just as it goes for most good things, it did not last forever. Despite his initial enthusiasm, Harold wanted a more stable and predictable life and returned to Rhode Island. In 1918, he filed for separation, then petitioned for divorce, citing abandonment. In 1921, the divorce was granted. Though her personal life may have seemed a wreck, her career was just getting ready to take off. In a couple of short years after her divorce from Harold McPherson, Amiee Semple McPherson would become a household name not only in Los Angeles, but in the world. But before I get to that, we need to pay the bills, so sit tight for about 90 seconds, and I'll be right back with the rest of this shocking tale. In 1918, McPherson moved to Los Angeles. Her mother, Mildred Kennedy, rented a 3,500-seat Philharmonic auditorium, and people waited for hours to get into the crowded venue. This was her first attempt at establishing a church of her own, and it was an overnight success. In fact, attendees of her meetings even built a home for her family. At the time, Los Angeles was a burgeoning tourist trap. The city drew people in from all over the nation, and more of those people just happened to never leave. It was the perfect moment for a new, charismatic religious leader to find footing. The permanent population of Los Angeles was growing exponentially each year, and the constant stream of tourists would visit Amie's meetings and would take those experiences back to their homes, where they would tell their friends and their neighbors about the new woman pastor out in L.A. For several years, she alternated between hosting meetings in Los Angeles Philharmonic Auditorium and traveling around Southern California, raising money for the construction of a new, large, domed church in the Echo Park area of Los Angeles. Not wanting to incur debt, McPherson found a construction firm willing to work with her as funds were raised by faith, beginning with a $5,000 payment for the foundation of a new building. McPherson mobilized diverse groups to fund and build the church, by means such as selling sponsored chairs for church seating. Raising more money than expected, McPherson altered her original plans and built a sprawling structure, a modern cathedral, America's first megachurch. The endeavor cost contributors around $250,000. She named it Angelus Temple, and it officially opened for business in 1923. The temple, located opposite Echo Park Lake, had an original seating capacity of 5,300. Angelus Temple was the largest construction of its time in North America, rising 125 feet from the main floor. A panorama of clouds, the work of artist Anne Henneke, adorns the ceiling, and the temple has 8 stained glass windows depicting the life of Jesus Christ, created by artist George Haskins. The structure's main architectural feature is its large, unsupported concrete dome. Coated with a mixture of ground abalone shells, the dome's interior was painted azure blue with fleecy clouds, a reminder to work while it's day and to look for his coming. McPherson insisted on a bright, joyous setting, avoiding any reminder of sin from either artwork or motto. In back of the pulpit was her theme verse, Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ the same yesterday and today and forever. She later said that she loved every stone in Angelus Temple. She loved to touch the walls, its altar, and to look at its high vaulted dome. It was her masterpiece, the culmination of her work in ministry. And it wasn't just the building itself that was grandiose. The activity inside the building was just as boisterous and entertaining. At the height of her popularity, Amiee Semple McPherson, going now as Sister Amiee, would do exciting stunts and incredible demonstrations of faith. At one service, she donned protective suit and helmet, got on a motorcycle, and jumped it off a small ramp on the stage in front of thousands of cheering fans. After landing her small jump, she pulled her helmet off and shouted, "You're speeding straight to hell," to the raucous applause of her congregation. Though her on-stage antics made her a very popular personality, the thing that made her famous were the miracles performed in Angelus Temple. These miracles are recalled by George Jameson, who would become one of the foundational leaders of Sister Amie's church. He says, "From the time I was 10 years old, I witnessed miracles of God at Angelus Temple during the 30s and 40s. I'm 89 now and remember some of these miracles as though they happened yesterday." Every Wednesday afternoon, Amiee Semple McPherson conducted divine healing services at Angelus Temple. Ambulances brought the hopeless cases from area hospitals. You could see the ambulances lining the streets, their occupants camped inside the temple, believing for a miracle. I wanted to see those miracles for myself and remember riding a streetcar after school to the temple, where I would work my way to the front of the sanctuary so I could be as close as possible to the altar when God did the miraculous. The ambulance drivers stood nearby with their ailing patients, waiting on canvas stretchers for their turn on the platform, where Sister Amiee would pray for them. Even the drivers seemed to know what was about to happen. Many of them had been to Angelus Temple before. They always left with empty stretchers. I saw Sister Amiee lay hands on people who could barely move and offer a simple prayer of faith. Then I saw these people crawl off their stretchers, healed and praising God. The more seasoned ambulance drivers were not shocked to leave the temple without their patients. In fact, I had to chuckle when I heard the drivers say, "Well, here we go again." They knew their other patients still waited at the hospital, and they would be back very soon with someone else who needed a miracle. As is still true of businesses today, a good product is nothing without good marketing. And Sister Amiee knew how to market her product. She employed a small group of artists, electricians, decorators, and carpenters who built sets for each service. Religious music was played by an orchestra. She would even get the assistance of Hollywood actors, directors, and set design crew to aid in these projects, making her sermons a full entertainment experience. Though McPherson condemned theater and film as the devil's workshop, its techniques were co-opted. She became the first woman evangelist to adopt cinematic methods. To avoid dreary church services, she delivered serious messages in a humorous tone. Animals were frequently incorporated. Sister Amiee gave up to 22 sermons a week, including a lavish Sunday night service, so large that extra trolleys and police were needed to help route traffic through Echo Park. Though Sister Amiee preached a conservative gospel, she used progressive methods, taking advantage of radio, movie, and stage acts. She was the first and one of the most successful celebrity preachers this nation has ever seen. But the most interesting thing about her life doesn't have anything to do with the gospel. On May 18, 1926, Sister Amiee went with her secretary to Ocean Park Beach for a swim. Soon after arriving, she was nowhere to be found. Simply vanished without a trace. After extensive search efforts turned up no evidence, she was presumed dead, taken by the sea. That very same day, her mother delivered a sermon that Sister Amiee was supposed to give, and at the end she told the congregation that Sister Amiee was with Jesus, which sent the congregation into tearful, rageful fits. William Randolph Hearst's Los Angeles newspapers reported on her death as quickly as possible, and Upton Sinclair even wrote a eulogy for her. Thousands of people combed the beaches trying to find any clue, any shred of evidence that could confirm the death of their favorite minister. When they couldn't find anything, the rumors began to swirl. Countless reports of Sister Amiee sightings popped up across the nation. In one day, she was reported to have been seen in 16 different cities. Her children were endlessly harassed for clues. The newspapers, sensing an opportunity to make a quick buck, accused her of running off with a former Angelus Temple member, caught in a lover's tryst. A barrage of ransom letters poured into the temple as well. Many people claimed to be holding Sister Amiee hostage and promised to let her free in exchange for some of the temple's money. One was a handwritten note by the Revengers who wanted $500,000, the equivalent of over $7 million in today's money. Another, for $25,000, was conveyed by a blind lawyer, Russell A. McKinley, who claimed contact with the kidnappers. A lengthy and poorly typewritten ransom letter from the Avengers arrived around June 19th, demanding $500,000. For a while, all hope seemed lost. Angelus Temple was prepared to officially mourn the death of its beloved founding preacher, and the city of Los Angeles was grief-stricken at the loss of one of its premier celebrities. But she wasn't dead. Thousands of miles away, Sister Amiee was alive. And when she was discovered, all hell broke loose. Join me next week as we enter the Liam Neeson part of Sister Amiee's story. Also, if you'd like to hear about my personal experience visiting Angelus Temple when I was a teenager, go ahead and push the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts. Your support means the world to me. The more support this show gets, the more I can do with it, the higher quality it will be, and it will be a better time for all of us, all around. As always, this episode was brought to you in part by Indie Drop-In Network and Earbuds Podcast Collective. Ariel and Greg are two of the best people in the business, and their two services will let you find your new second favorite show. They sincerely do so much to help me personally. I would love it if you actually checked out their products. They are great people, and I owe them a great deal. Also, feel free to reach out on social media at AllThePeoplePod on Twitter, because Twitter won't let you change your username, and I am restless. Obscure History Podcast on Instagram, because Instagram does let you change your username. There is a Facebook. I don't use it because Facebook is poison. You can also email at obscurehistorypod at gmail.com. It's late. I don't even know all my own things. Anyways, I better go. I've got work in the morning. Feel free to reach out, share the episode with your bitter enemies. I'll talk to you next week.